welcome to Spiceworks Live. This is episode 3, Focus Your Scans with Spiceworks 6.2. Hello everyone, welcome to Spiceworks Live. My name is Elise. I'm in marketing here at Spiceworks. And if you're tuning in for the first time, this is Spiceworks Live. This is where we at Spiceworks here in Austin bring you all of the latest and greatest that's in the beta release of 6.2, which is our latest product release. And there's a bunch of really cool features in it that promise to help you focus your scans, focus your tickets, and focus your time. So lots of good stuff for IT pros out there. And today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking to David Babbitt, one of our head technical program managers here at Spiceworks, who's going to be telling us all about the latest stuff that just went into the second build of the beta. And so we're going to be doing an interview with him, with Caroline, and some demos, I believe, might be in the works on that. Very exciting. Followed by what we always do here, which is a live Q&A. So send your questions in using the social stream window right below the player window that you're watching. And we'll be answering all of your questions on 6.2 live. And everyone that gets their questions answered will be also receiving a very cool pair of Spiceworks sunglasses, which are not available anywhere, which makes them that much cooler. You know what I'm talking about. So, with no further ado, off to the interview portion with Caroline and David. Hello, guys.
Hello. Thanks, Elise. Hey, David. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. So I guess we'll get right into it. What can people expect from this Beta 2 release of 6.2?
Right. So the Beta 2 release came out this morning. We've been slaving away on it for the past few weeks really furiously. The change in here is changing the network scanner in terms of how you configure it and how often it scans, and basically the scheduling of all the network scanning. And so it's great. Sorry, it's live. I say that we've been working furiously on it for the past couple of weeks, but actually the change has been in the works for the better part of this year. So it's a pretty big change. So we're really looking forward to people helping us test out the changes that we made in here and help us find the bugs. I know we're going to find some. That's fine. And that's what the purpose of the beta is. We're in it to measure how much of these we can fix in the next few weeks before we get this thing ready for GA. So it'll be easier to talk about it with the demo, but in a nutshell, we've changed the scanner dramatically for how you schedule scans.
Oh, great. Well, if it's easier to show in demo, you want to just go ahead and flip over to that?
All right, we can do that.
Great.
So I'm going to be switching between a few different VMs here as I do this demo. So the first one that you're looking at is this is as soon as you first install Spiceworks, the beta. And so if you install it and you don't take your database from your production install over to your beta environment, when you go through the installation procedure and you pick inventory as the first thing that you want to do, it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. Many of you have seen this before, but you'll notice up here at the top that we actually already identify how many computers that we found on your network before we start scanning. And so I'll talk about that as I kick off the scan here. So you type in your passwords. So the 2 boxes here, if you've never gone through this or if it's been a really long time since you've gone through this, we'll find many things on the network, but we know that we're basically going to find Windows computers and Macs or Linux computers. And so we go ahead and enter those credentials up front before we start the scan, and then we can resolve some of the issues that we collect over the course of scanning later on. So I'm going to kick off the scan. So I mentioned the 81 at the top, and so one thing that's a little bit different, it's actually a lot different as I talk about the rest of the scanning configuration, is here we're mentioning the 85 or the 81 devices that we found, and then the number of devices that have actually been inventoried. And so I think that's kind of that's a big point that I want to make or reiterate, is that there's a difference between just identifying an address or a computer that responds by his IP address on the network versus us logging into that computer and collecting all the inventory detail off of that computer. So that's something that we're making a little bit more apparent in this very first flow. We've got, right now we're in the works of changing this first flow as well to where you can actually see what's going on a little bit more. But that will hopefully make it into the next release. But for right now, just know that identified and scanning is completely different. And so as we get into the scan settings page, I'll describe that in more detail. So I'm going to switch computers now to another computer that's already been actually migrated from my production network. So this is under Settings, Network Scan. So when you go to Inventory Settings, one important thing discovered. And then you go to network scan. It will take you to this page where this is how you configure the scan. And so I'm going to go through this page in a little bit of detail here. The other thing that you're going to notice when you first install Spiceworks 6.2 is you'll get this message. I think you've probably seen something like this before. And so it talks about what's in the release. And so it's going to talk about how things are fundamentally different. And then it has this link right here that also takes you to that page. So ignore the big blue box here. This is actually what I'm going to be talking about, so you don't have to read that if you can even read this stuff through the live stream here. But it's going to describe kind of how the scanner is completely different. And so like I said, the big new thing to talk about is the fact that we've separated identifying computers on your network from scanning computers. And so it really means that the scanner has been kind of separated into two different phases. The first phase is to go through and search all the networks that you configure and find computers. As it finds new computers, it scans those computers for the first time. After that, once it's identified computers and inventoried them, everything else from that point forward is going to be what we call like the data collection or rescanning that computer. And that is something that you control at a different frequency. So again, we will identify computers in one phase and inventory them for the first time. And then after that, we'll go through and then scan them fully and collect all the data that we collect from them at a different interval. So, and I'll talk about the different ways that you configure it as I go down the page here. So the first thing is just what are your networks? And so that first screen that I showed you on the fresh install, we're just going to automatically scan the LAN that you're connected to, and we're going to start you off with that. When you want to come back and scan more networks after you've gotten through that first scan, you come to this section right here. This is just, search for the network, search for new devices on the IP ranges below is what it says. So you add an IP range, you can just type the network range. If you've done this in previous releases, it's very similar. You just type, you can use the classless CIDR notation, you can use dashes, you can use different ways of typing in IP ranges. And you'll have these different ranges. You can then, if you want to go back and edit them, you can click edit and then change these ranges over time. And that's it. That's all we're doing in that first section is identifying what the extent of your network is. Then it'll go off and do that process of searching that network for the devices and then scanning those devices as best it can. So in order to scan, you need to add passwords to the system. So this whole box right here, this section called stored passwords, this is where we store all the passwords. And so when you come back to your settings page over time, you know the system has stored passwords in it. You've changed a password, for example, in your domain. You need to come back in here, find that account. Here I know that, let's say I changed my Hyper-V password, that I come back in here and I change the password, hit save. Here's the password that I use by default to scan the network, and so it has this checkbox, try this account for new devices. So as it discovers new devices, it's going to use this account. If I want to add a new account, I click Add New Account. Let's say that I've got a different domain. That was a question that came up in the forum yesterday. So if I've got a different domain, test domain or something like that, and I want to add that one, test user, password, I can say try this account for new devices as well. And so as it identifies new computers on the network, it will try multiple accounts based on that, or it could try multiple accounts based on that checkbox right there. In the first release here, we've got this box for use for new devices. When I say first release, I mean the first beta drop of this. So you can't edit this yet. And so it'll show you, I'll show you an example. In the case of like this, it'll show you the accounts that the computers that the account is being used on, but you can't edit this box yet. And we'll have that ready for the next beta. But you'll go through, you can associate specific accounts with specific computers the way that you always have, which is really interacting with those devices inside of inventory. So not necessarily just using the stored passwords box right here. So you can see there's a lot of different accounts that we support in order to scan different types of computers. This first beta drop, this is in the release notes. We don't have icons on some of these, but we're working on that. So again, moving down the page. So here's the meat of the page. So the top of the page was basically just saying, not how often, but where do I scan my network? And the how often it goes off in searches is something we're going to work on over time. We're trying to move to the point over time where it's going to kind of constantly be on the watch for new devices showing up on your network. So in that way, when it finds it, it'll scan it, and then the interval in which it goes and recollects data is going to be dictated by this configuration right here. So this is a pretty big change. So let me kind of go through this slowly. So the The way that scanning used to work was that it scanned everything from every computer kind of all the time, or at the interval that you used to specify at the top of the old network scan settings page. And actually, I'm going to show you that for comparison here. This is a 6.1 install. And so you see at the top of the schedule here, or at the top of the page, you've got all your networks, and then there's one schedule that you configure. This is the one schedule that dictated how often do I scan every device on my network. And the reality is, as we've talked to users, is that all of your devices don't matter to you equally. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that there's certain computers that are more important than other computers. And so, for example, servers that are running your business process or your business applications, those servers matter more than, let's say, laptops of, I don't know, some department that isn't as critical what's running on their laptops. Maybe you've got spares, whatever it might be. You're not monitoring those laptops as closely as you need to be monitoring the servers that are running your business applications. And or you could say like C-level executives, you want to scan those laptops at a more frequent basis than maybe the other laptops on your network, and that's something that you couldn't do before. And so what we wanted to do was say that we recognize all devices are not created equally. Allow you to configure your scan intervals with more respect to how you intend to support those devices. There are more important computers than others, and then along with that, also say what data from those computers is also important. So maybe the software data from your servers isn't as important as the software data from your laptops, because you control the servers and your users are controlling those laptops. You want to know what they're installing. You know what you're installing on your server. So you don't need to necessarily go and collect software installed on your servers every 15 minutes. That's just bogging down the scanner. Instead, let's go and focus the scanner's effort on collecting software from the laptops, for example, rather than your servers. And so all of that kind of stuff is configured on this in this box right here. So the different boxes in here are the types of data that we're going to collect. And so all data, resource data, this would be like capacities, levels, how full is a mailbox, how full is a disk. Utilization data, so what services are currently running, what's the network bandwidth on that device, stuff like that. Windows events we've separated as a separate thing because those matter. We want you to control that on an individual schedule. And then the up-down check, so how often our computers, or rather, make sure the computers are on the network. And what you're looking at right here is also the defaults that we have configured as far as how often we're going to schedule within these different categories. So each of the rows within the boxes controls how often for which group of devices do we scan for that type of data. So here in the all box, we're basically saying all devices, we're going to scan those daily at 2 a.m. Inside the resources box, we say, and again, this was for like disks and network adapters, configuration, mailboxes, things like that. So I want to scan printers every 15 minutes. That means go and collect printer ink, basically, from printers every 15 minutes, and then scan the configuration of servers, because not the configuration, but the running services and software on servers, scan that every 5 minutes, because if I want to go and create an alert for monitoring services, I want to do that. I want to be notified frequently. Utilization, again, like network bandwidth, I want to know stuff like that from my networking switches and from my servers every 5 minutes. From the rest of my devices, maybe every 15 minutes. I want to know if anybody's hogging the network, but I don't need to be alerted to it quite as often as I want to know from my switches. Windows events, we're only going to collect that from your servers. Up-down check, we're only going to do that for your servers. We don't need the scanner spending time doing an up-down check for a bunch of laptops that are on Wi-Fi that are going to come and go as they should, right? Stuff like that. So that's kind of a big deal there. It's going to take a little bit of time for you to kind of wrap your head around that. I understand that. I feel like I've been doing a demo for a while here. I do want to show I do want to show one more thing. So this will be like sort of my showcase for why we did something like this. So let's take for example, I want to go and create a group. This is leveraging a feature that we released in Beta 1. I want to go and create a group for computers that are running Microsoft SQL Server, because those computers matter to me. Okay. So I switched over to the custom groups. This is where you define groups. Work with me, demo. Oh yeah, new group. Okay, so I'm going to say SQL Server group. I'm not going to bother with changing the picture right now. But so this is the thing that we added in the first beta. And so now you can go and create groups, these dynamic groups with lots and lots of different rules. And so if I want to go and create a group with what software is installed on those computers, I'm going to go through here and say installed applications. And that installed application contains SQL Server. You can see some of the matches, but you don't have to grab the full thing. So I'm just going to say SQL Server, so that's 22 devices. go and create that group. Now I'm going to go back to the network scan page that we were on and use that new group, sort of saying that this is a group that's important to me. I'm going to go and configure scanning that group more often. So now I'm going to go down here to the schedules page and say for that group, well, first let me go and say that this 5-minute interval check for the utilization is too often for my network because it's too broad, and so I'm going to turn this down to 15 minutes. But for the SQL Server group, which still matters to me a lot, I'm going to go and add a new schedule and say I'm going to capture utilization, and then from the SQL Server group, every 5 minutes, every day of the week. And so there you go. It adds it to this. Now it's going to go off and collect utilization, which includes the running services. I can then go into monitors and say, tell me when a service stops that's not supposed to be stopped, and then it'll send me an alert, and it's scanning every 5 minutes. So that's sort of the whole reason that we did this change, was to allow you to create more expressive groups and then leverage those groups so that your monitors make more sense or more meaningful to you.
Great.
It's a lot of demo, I'm sorry.
No, but it was all very interesting. So, I mean, and hopefully everybody can then use what they've just seen, try it out, and give us some feedback on it. And on that note, is there anything in particular you really want people kind of hammering on and giving feedback in the group on?
Yes, for sure. So I think the biggest thing that we've got sort of a little bit of fear on is what happens when people migrate their old databases forward. So let me talk about that for a little bit. So before, everything used to be scheduled at the top of this box, right? And so in here you have all the different specific passwords. You had all of the ranges. But one of the things that you could do in here is specify a custom schedule for one of these rows. And so if I hit edit, and I could say, rather than doing the default scan settings, I could say custom scan settings. And now I can set a different schedule for this one row. And so the thing that I think is that I'm sort of looking for feedback on is, we know that about 10% of you probably do that, just based on some of the analytics that we know from the application and then also from talking to users. About 10% of you are scheduling custom, rather creating custom schedules for these rows. And the thing is that we don't exactly know why. I mean, when I talk to people that have done it, I ask them why, and I get these different reasons. But in some ways, it's probably more like you were coping with the system that we gave you, rather than you were doing it because you needed to do it that way. And let me describe what I mean there with an example. So before, this was the only thing that you could do, was schedule a network or a subset of your network at a different interval than your default scan. Maybe you did that because the scanner was taking too long to scan everything at the interval, the only interval that you could control, which was the entire network. And so then you broke it up into, I'm going to scan this subset of the network at this interval and this other subset of the network at a different interval. And then that way I sort of break up my scan so my computer's not constantly scanning, or when the scan runs, it doesn't take 5 hours to complete, right? And so that was one reason. Another reason could have really been that you've got 20 IP addresses that are allocated or reserved for important computers, right? And so I guess what I'm saying is that we're not really taking your scan schedules that you've created there and moving them forward in a way that might be pleasing to you, simply because we want you to start thinking in the new world, which is go and group those devices, and then you're going to go and schedule that group. We can't automatically sort of figure out what your intent was just based on you had an IP range that was being scanned more frequently. And so the analogy that I use for this is my favorite analogy to be using these days. It's sort of like we gave you this big truck in the old release. And this big truck, you could schedule, I mean, with the big truck, and this is sort of talking about the scheduler, maybe it didn't quite work to your needs. You wanted a fast car. And so you started like putting, lowered your truck, put a bigger roll bar on it, got some bit tougher springs on there, whatever. You're basically turning your truck into a sports car, right? And so what we're doing here is we're giving you a sports car. And we want you to start using the new sports car, the new scanner, the way that we built the scanner, which is create groups for those computers. Those groups can be very expressive, using all the new rules. You can schedule the scan based on that group. And so going back to the analogy, we don't want you to try and figure out a way where you can take your roll bar off your truck and put it on your sports car. It doesn't make sense. Like, you kind of have to unlearn what you were coping with in the past, like trying to sport up your truck, and just deal with the fact that we're giving you a sports car and start to learn how to drive stick.
I like it. I like that analogy.
I hope that helps. I don't know. So that's, I think, just in terms of feedback, when you migrate your thing forward, and you see stuff that you just don't expect, bring that up in the community. We need to work through those issues in order so that when we unleash this thing on the masses, that it's not just like a complete mess for us dealing with, support requests from people that don't understand it, stuff like that. We want to make this as painless as possible.
Great, perfect. Well, I know we're going to have some really good questions coming off of this because this is such a big and interesting change. So
it's a big change.
Yeah, real big change. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Elise so we can get on to Q&A after
Definitely.
that. So thanks. On to you, Elise.
Guys. Awesome. Good stuff. Speaking of questions, if you have them on the new scan stuff, on the new build that just went in about an hour ago, or on anything else in 6.2, get those questions in using the social stream in the window right underneath the player window. And in case you're wondering how to get involved, we've been talking a lot about how to get involved with the beta and get us feedback and help us test it out. All you need to do is go to community.spiceworks.com and do a search for 6.2, and you'll get to the 6.2 group. And in that group, in the main on the main page, you'll see a bunch of announcements. And in those announcements, there will be a post from Nick and all kinds of other posts that'll give you all the information you need to get involved with the beta, help us beta test, and be sure you follow the group, and that way you'll get all of the latest sort of announcements in your feed as they come. So another really fun thing about the beta that we do here at Spiceworks is we have a bunch of contests that reward our users for being involved and helping us out. So one of those contests is the beta contest of the week. It has nothing to do with this queue of fine-looking mustachioed gentlemen that just paraded behind me, which, in case you're wondering, has to do with Movember, which is a really excellent cause. And we are seeing a lot of random mustaches around Spiceworks HQ lately. Is it the last? It's the last day, right? Or yeah. Last couple of days, so everyone's in full bloom, as it were. So, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about the Beta Tester of the Week contest and the Beta Bug Spotter of the Week contest. So two really fun ways to get involved every week. Last week was a short week because of Thanksgiving, so I will be announcing the winner on Monday for the 2 weeks combined. But we are giving some cool prizes and some swag away to users who are helping us test the beta and who are contributing above and beyond. So for Monday the 19th, for the first week of the beta, our winners were Bernard W. and Tank203. Thanks so much, guys. I don't know if you're watching, but if you are, thank you. These two also helped us a lot during 6.0 and won a fair number of contests for that. Bernard was our beta MVP for 6.0. So no strangers to the contest or to helping us beta test. So everyone that's out there beta testing, thank you so much. And everyone that's not, go ahead and follow the group and find out how you can help. And that is it for me. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the live Q&A. Don't forget to send your questions in, because if we ask them and they get answered on the air, you will get to go. Hold on, let me try that again. You will you will be on the list to receive a very cool pair of Spiceworks sunglasses there. I got it out. So get your questions in. Hello.
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 Hello again.
How's it going? Is it on? We're here. What's up, guys? Jeff Gretler, still DB. Ready to rock and roll with some of your questions. The war against IT inefficiency. We are winning because of you, our band of beta brothers. And by brothers, I mean brothers and sisters. So let's do this. We already got a lot of questions. I mean, you hit them with a lot of knowledge, so we'll get going. You ready?
I'm ready.
To rock
Let's
and
do
roll?
this.
All right. First question is Nella NAYRB. Will the new network scan features, how can we limit the scan to a certain AD group?
Right. So by default, when we scan the network, it will log into the domain controller and figure out your AD groups, and it will create groups for. I'm assuming the question isn't about migrating, so I won't talk about what happens with the old versions. So just with the new version. So when we scan the network, we will identify the AD groups. So if you've got OUs inside of AD that group computers, we will actually create groups inside of our inventory that represent those groups. They have a little AD badge on them when they show up in inventory. I don't know if you guys can show the computer over here, but
yeah, that was in the old version as well.
Yeah, that's in the
right?
old version. So if like you scroll down, so these are all the groups inside of inventory. So we categorize computers based on what OS they're running, what type of device they are, stuff like that. But like this MR computers, this is one of our OUs inside of Active Directory, and so it has a little Active Directory badge there in the corner. And then so you can schedule the scan based on the AD group down here. You can say, so MR computers, if I want to use that and then say I'm going to collect everything from those computers a little bit more often, let's say daily, daily at 2 p.m. Actually, more often would mean like every 12 hours, every 8 hours, something like that. You can schedule a scan that way.
So can that exclude them then as well? Like if you wanted to take something out of a scan range, or you probably...
No, so everything by default, you can't not scan something, as it were.
At least once, right?
Well, I'm actually, maybe you can delete this row here. I haven't thought about that case. But we kind of want to make sure that everything is being scanned at least once daily. And so before, I think it was twice daily. So we've turned it down to once daily and then allowed you to turn up scanning on the other groups.
Right, makes sense. All right, let's see, ShudDB. How does the scanning handle local NIC and wireless NIC to avoid duplicate entries?
Good question. So when we scan the computer, we're doing a network sweep. And so, doing it that way, what you're going to end up with, might be better if I draw this.
Yeah. Got markers too, right? Yeah, good.
OK. So let me figure this out. So when you're scanning a computer and it's attached on multiple networks.
That makes sense.
So you've got the... well, how do you draw a wireless picture?
Yeah.
Forget it.
Make it kind of cloud. Oh,
no, it's too complicated. Forget it. Sorry about that. Let me just talk about it. So you're gonna sweep the network on one network, and then you're gonna log into the computer. When you log into the computer, when we log into the computer using one of its IP addresses, we'll figure out what the other IP addresses are and all the MAC addresses. And doing that, then we won't create two devices in inventory. We recognize once we're then scanning the wireless later on, we log into that computer. Well, really, at that point, we already know it's that computer because we've already scanned it on the wired NIC, for example. And then, but once you're able to log into it, then it'll see that it's the same computer. What you do want to make sure, though, is if you've got pretty sophisticated firewalls turned on that maybe are blocking it from one network and allowing it from another network, you want to make sure that you're allowing the scanner from all the networks. Otherwise, you could run into a situation where it finds it on one network, but then it can't scan this IP address on another network, and it ends up creating like unknowns in that case.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you're able to scan it on every device that you can reach from the Spiceworks server.
Cool. All right, Marlon Deer, is there any way to let me start all over again, reboot. Is there any way of having a description included beside each network that will be scanned?
That's a good question. Not right now. That would be something that'd be pretty easy to do with a plugin, honestly. I assume that the user means up here at the top. Yeah, that's an interesting question. We can think about doing that, or we can do that with a plugin.
Broken Spoke 2, is there any way to scan an ESXi host without having the remote tech support option enabled?
Yeah, I think remote tech support option, I'm not familiar. Is that the SSH, turning on the SSH account? So you don't have to do that. I think that there's like an old how-to from 2-something years ago in Spiceworks on how to scan ESX computers. So now, if you guys can show the computer over here, when you scan the network, we'll find vSphere computers and recognize that they're vSphere computers. And we actually scan vSphere or ESX computers using the vSphere API. So you don't have to turn on that remote tech support, whatever that thing is, the SSH account, I'm assuming, because we'll scan it with the API. So you do have to put in the, this is not the vCenter login, which would be potentially like a Windows login. This is the actual account on the host itself, and so you go put that in here, and then you can rescan that device. Or if you're in inventory looking at that group, probably initially it's going to show up somewhere under the scan errors, and so we're working on this flow. But when you go through here and you find one, it'll say something like, I've got lots of scan errors because I didn't put in all the passwords. Somewhere in here it'll have one that says something about vSphere. Yeah, here's one. So this account, you need a vSphere password. So it says authentication failed because no ESXi or vSphere password was provided. And so it says the same at the top of the device. You click on Manage Accounts, and then you can create a new vSphere account, test it, and then scan it straight away right there. So you don't have to actually go to the scan settings page and kind of a priori go and set up all these accounts to scan computers. So you can kind of individually fix the scan errors throughout inventory.
Cool. Let's see, D. Hildebrand, patiently waiting for SLA levels. Any idea on when, if ever, this will be on the roadmap?
SLA, that's a good question. So we've got some SLA features going into this release, and in fact, some are in this drop right now. So we're going to do another live stream next week, I believe, so I think we can demo some of that stuff. But I will say there's kind of a couple of different things to think about when you're doing SLAs. One is just raising the awareness of a ticket that could be falling behind, whatever that is not being attended to. And so, for example, if your techs aren't responding or your admins aren't responding to a ticket and you want to raise the awareness of that ticket, maybe you would do something like color it a different color or put it in a specific view or send out an alert. So we've got features like that, so we can set up a monitor on tickets that are stale, meaning nobody's responded to the users, or you can set up an alert on tickets that are nearing or approaching their due date. And so the one big part of SLAs is raising the awareness of tickets. So we've got those features going into the release. We've got some of them in on this drop, and we'll have some more in on the next drop. The other part of SLAs is where do you actually define the service level agreement itself? So what dictates the service level agreement? Is it the owner of that ticket? Is it the computer that's coming from? So I don't. We're not focusing on that in this release. So currently what you can basically say is I'm going to go and set up an alert that says across all of my tickets I need to be making sure I'm responsive in certain time frames, or I need to make sure that if I set a due date on a ticket that that it's resolved before that due date, have alerts set up on that. So we're kind of working on that end of the SLA problem before we go and figure out what's the way that we dictate SLAs without it being complicated. I've seen some other tools out there. I'm not going to bash other tools, but this can get really complicated if we don't try to be careful about it. And so
this would be different for your type of industry too, I think, just as far as more corporate structure, it's just going to be depending on what kind of is actually going on, so it's going to skew the time. So pirate code becomes pirate guideline, as Barbosa said.
Yeah, certainly everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I think trying to codify making it a practice, I think it's just it makes it really complicated, tough. And so we're trying to kind of step into this slowly before we make it we don't want to unleash something that's completely complicated.
Unleash the beast. All right, RT Keating. When we finish the beta, I keep stuttering. It's the mustache,
it's
right?
It's the mustache.
It's like it's weighing my lips down.
Yeah.
Well, when we finish the beta and we release shows up, when will we be able to install? Okay, I'll start all over. When we finish the beta and the release shows up, will we be able to install over the beta?
Afraid not.
Afraid not.
Yeah, so you'll notice at the top of the screen here it says, it's running the scan, so it doesn't show that message. At the top of the screen, when it's not running a scan or something like that, it actually shows that this is a beta release and you have a certain number of days left to work with this release. And it also mentions that you're not allowed to move your data forward. So anything that you're doing with your beta copy of Spiceworks, you can kind of forget about it. This is just playland. You can really bang around on it. That was the intent. We wanted to make sure that you're kind of not using this in production because we want you to really kind of be abusive with it, not try to roll it into production and then you're sort of gingerly playing with it because you don't really want to mess with your users or your core inventory data. And so that means, in fact, you'll see this when you try to upgrade your beta 1 to beta 2, we won't allow that. You have to start over. And then when you install beta 2, we're also not allowing you to take your beta 1 database and move it forward to beta 2. And there's a whole write-up on this in the community, but the short version of it is that we spend time in past releases as we've been doing this and people have been using the beta and upgrading from release to release. We have spent time trying to fix bugs that were the result of using it in beta when the data wasn't quite perfect inside the database, and then we're trying to figure out how do we treat that data in the next beta release or going to production. And it was just I would rather be focusing on real bugs, not bugs that are introduced because people are running the beta code inside of production. And so that's why it's a little bit draconian in a way that it's not allowing you to do some things that you were used to doing in the past. And I'm sorry about that. It's just that we want to focus our effort in the right area.
And it prompts you too, right? Because when I did the install on our beta, it wouldn't let me go any further when it just
if you try to install it right on top of production, it won't even allow it. Yeah.
Not that I tried that, Chris. All right, Frank Howard 140. With the new scanning options, would you recommend starting a new install or importing old DB? I guess we just kind of really touched on that, huh?
Through the beta, you can test with your old database. And in fact, we want you to test with your old database. You just have to set it up on a test server. You take your backup of your old Spiceworks production install, take a backup of it, and drop it onto unzip it inside of the folder where you installed your beta, and then start up your Spiceworks server. It'll take your old data and it'll show it to you. It'll migrate it forward and it'll show it to you in the new beta. We want you to do that because we want you to make sure that like I was talking about earlier, the settings that you had on this page, those that make sense anyway in the new way of thinking, those got moved forward in a way that makes sense to you. We want to get feedback on that. As far as going to production later on, if that's what the question is, should you just start over or should you migrate forward? I say migrate forward and just start learning the new world. I'm not a big fan of like throwing away all your inventory data and starting from scratch. So, but I guess it's up to you. I mean, I've helped people in the past, like, how do you delete everything in inventory? Keep all my help desk tickets, but delete everything in inventory so I can just start fresh. Hey, if you've got nothing in there like attachments or anything that you care about, that's fine. You can do that too.
Cool.
I guess that's not really an answer, but
No,
hey,
it's good.
It's up
It
to
worked. All right, let's see. We got time for one more question. KLTV IT. Can I set scan schedules per IT subnet? Example, servers one subnet, users on another, etc.
So you can create, scan schedules, again, meaning how often do we go and collect data from those devices, not how often do we search that network for new devices. So again, that's a separation here. Searching and scanning are separate. So scanning, you can go and create a group using the rules, and the rules can be based on IP address, and you can say, this IP address, this network, you can scan it with, on this interval, and this other network you can scan on a different interval. Now, I don't know if that totally makes sense in the new world now that you have this new capability. Maybe it's, laptops need to be scanned differently than workstations, regardless of what network they're on.
Cool. Great questions as usual. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, man.
All right,
now the big question is, do we keep the mustache?
There's no
That
way,
is the
man.
question. No, that's it, right?
That's right.
It's a wrap on the
I
mustache.
can't get within. My wife always asks for a shout out on the live stream, so this is the shout out to my wife. I can't get within like 10 feet of her with this thing, and so
It's got a mind of its own.
It's got
awareness.
It's reached awareness.
It's watching you, not me. It's watching you.
So this thing has to go.
Yeah, that's it. I agree. All right, thanks again, guys. Caroline, Elise, back to you.
All right,
Thanks.
so that was this is the conclusion of the Movember edition of Spiceworks Live. Sounds like everyone's excited to get rid of their stashes. We cannot relate, but we support it in spirit, I suppose,
Exactly.
right? So congratulations to everyone who got their questions answered on the air. Be sure to PM me in the community or email me at elise@spiceworks.com, and I will get you on the list to get those cool sunglasses. And one last note, I was just trying to send the link on the live stream chat, but it didn't work. So somebody was asking about the link between 6.2 and the Spice Corps contest. So I just want to talk to that really, really quickly. There is another contest. If you're a member of a Spice Corps, which are our local user groups out there, and if you're a member of one and you're helping us test the beta, you can get points for your Spice Corps. I think it's 50 points for every bug that you log. And the winner, the collective winner, the winning Spice Corps will get to take home an actual Spice Cup, which gets handed around to the winning Spice Corps every quarter. So it's another fun way to get involved. So anyway, that's all part of the contest fun.
And of course, get into the 6.2 group. Check out the new beta post, download the beta, install it, try it out, test all this great stuff that David's been talking about, and post your feedback, questions, comments, everything. We're listening, and we really, really value that feedback. So get into the group, join the group, and follow along.
And if you're looking for it, just type 6.2 in the community and you will find it. That's how you get to it. So stay tuned. We're not exactly sure when the next live stream is going to be. We're going to see how the beta goes. So stay tuned, follow the group, and you will be the first to know when you can tune in next. But bookmark this page because that's where we'll let you know about it. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.